everybody. Welcome to NFL Fantasy Live. I'm Patrick Claybon here with Marcus Grant, Adam Rank, and Maurice Jones-Drew. Michael F. Florio is going to join us a bit. Happy Friday, guys. We made it. Are you feeling good about your fantasy teams after the first game this week?
Well, I'm feeling all right. I will say, as I'm going through these lineups right now and I'm seeing a whole lot of injuries pop up, I'm starting to worry about how I'm going to kind of fill starting lineups at this point. I may have to be scrambling on the waiver wire.
Yeah, I was just lucky that I'm not going against Nick Chubb in too many leagues, so I'm feeling pretty good right now.
We feel great. 1-0 in every league. Only have one major injury. We're good to go.
Yeah, the reason Maurice feels great is because one of those 1-0s is against me. Yay! That's our teams. Let's get a look at the rest of the league. In case you missed it, getting some news here. George Kittle been ruled out for week 2 against the Jets after suffering a knee injury last week. Who's going to be able to pick up some slack, MJD?
Well, first I'm going to look at Jerick McKinnon and these running backs. And then from there, if he's not out there or he's picked up already, I would go to Jordan Reed. You know what? This is going to be a game for Jordan Reed to kind of shine. He's finally healthy. We've seen some design plays for him as we're watching here, doing a great job of running routes. This is a guy that I think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to kind of lean on a little bit in that passing game.
Yeah, I mean, Maurice touched on the running backs. I do think McKinnon and Mostert kind of get a little bit of work. There is a name, though, a name of a pass catcher I think you should keep an eye on. I will mention it a little bit later on in the show.
Logan Thomas?
No, not Logan Thomas.
All right, let's look over at Chris Godwin, the Buccaneers. He was in the concussion protocol this week. He was back as a participant in practice today. But Bruce Arians said he's still doubtful against Carolina Sunday. So where are we going to go on this Bucs offense, Michael?
Well, I think Scotty Miller is kind of the next guy up there. We saw last week. He got a lot of attention from Tom Brady. If Chris Godwin doesn't go, I expect you're going to see Miller move into the slot, which is where Brady tends to throw a lot of his passes. So you have a guy that seems to have a good relationship, put him in a spot where Brady likes to throw the football, and it's a recipe for a pretty big day.
And he gave him a good nickname, Scooter. Let's look over at the Titans. They've got a big second-year wideout in A.J. Brown. He's been ruled out for Sunday's game against the Jags. Rank, what does that mean for Ryan Tannehill?
Yeah, this kind of impacts his matchup because we really like Tannehill coming into this week. I mean, going back to week 7 of 2019, only Lamar Jackson has more fantasy points amongst quarterbacks, and he's been real consistent, at least 17 points in 10 of his last 11 games. And in his only game against the Jags, he scored over 32 fantasy points. So we could see instead a heavy dose of Derrick Henry.
And Kenny Golladay ruled out for week 2 against the Packers with that hamstring injury that he's been dealing with. MJD, if you've got Golladay in fantasy, what is your next move?
Try to go pick up T.J. Hawkinson. I think he's going to have a huge day, a guy that we saw week 1 have some big plays. Again, you know, when you have your red zone target is out in Golladay, most of the time they're going to go to Hawkinson. He's finally healthy, which is exciting to see. You can see his playmaking ability with the ball in his hands.
Elsewhere, Jets leading receiver, thanks mainly to one play, Jamison Crowder, ruled out with a hamstring injury for Sunday's game against the 49ers. Not a lot to smile about on that Jets offense with or without Jamison Crowder. And Fins head coach Brian Flores says that Devontae Parker is going to be a game-time decision against Buffalo. He's been limited all week with a hamstring injury. So that is the news around the league. Let's get to last night, where points were scored, including a few on the ground from that Cleveland Browns offense, Adam Rank.
Yeah, you know what? A lot of people overreacted to the performance of Nick Chubb against the Baltimore Ravens, and then he goes out and obliterates the Cincinnati Bengals, and now they don't want to give him any credit for that because they don't think the Bengals are any good. So what do you want from him? What does he need to do? Because is there an average team he can play? But honestly, this is really what we expected out of Nick Chubb. Even though he's going to be ceding some time to Kareem Hunt, he is still going to be the lead running back. And I got to be honest, that offensive line looked pretty impressive to me. They invested a lot of resources in the free agency and draft capital into that offensive line, and it showed last night.
Well, Rank, I'll tell you this much. Kareem Hunt did a really good job showing up in the limited times that he had 10 rushes, 86 yards. You see him catch the ball out of the backfield as well. They have a two-headed monster, something I remember playing when I was in Jacksonville. So if you have Kareem Hunt, I think he's going to be a valuable flex play every week because as we saw on Thursday night, this offense is going to go through the running backs, and Kareem Hunt is a guy that can stay healthy and do so many different things. Just got paid. He's going to be used as a receiver and a running back. Again, 24 points in a limited role.
And over on the other side of the field, Joe Burrow didn't win any efficiency awards last night, but we're on a fantasy program, and opportunity is what matters. And boy, did he have it. 61 attempts, 30-plus fantasy points. No one's playing horseshoes and hand grenades here, but there were some touchdowns that were actually left on the field as well. He's currently starting in 7% of leagues right now. I think that's going to go up. He does lose C.J. Uzomah with that Achilles injury, though, so that hurts a bit for the Bengals.
Well, see, one of those touchdowns that he threw there was to Tyler Boyd, came late in the ball game, and a lot of the production for Boyd did come in the fourth quarter with Cincinnati in catch-up mode. But hey, garbage points still count. The question now is you wonder whether or not Boyd becomes more a focal point of the passing game. A.J. Green has led the team in targets the first couple of weeks, but has been wildly inefficient and just doesn't quite look like the A.J. Green we remember. Next week, a potentially favorable matchup against the Eagles, so I'd like to see if Boyd can really get going in a big way.
Had some fun this time around. Thursday Night Football back next week. Dolphins at Jags. Thursday, September 24th, 8 o'clock Eastern, only on NFL Network. All right, so let's dig into the 14 games on the docket this weekend. Time for our Sunday showdowns. Throughout this hour, we're going to go game by game to highlight some starts, sits, sleepers, and players to beware. Starting with the Atlanta Falcons, visiting the Cowboys in Jerry World. Which of Dallas's three wideouts rank are you starting?
Well, I like all three of them, but I'm really interested to see Michael Gallup in this contest. Last week was a little bit of a disappointment, just 8 fantasy points, but you know, he's had an average of 77 receiving yards per game since 2019. That's 8th amongst receivers. And we saw last week, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, each had 90-plus receiving yards against the Falcons. So I think this is going to be a huge opportunity for him to get back on track.
On the other side, I like Russell Gage as a sleeper this week. We saw him as one of 3 Falcons receivers to have 100 yards in week 1. Atlanta had a nearly 3-to-1 pass-to-run ratio in that first week. Could be similar in week 2 if this turns into a track meet, which is what I expect. Gage played about 68% of the snaps, was targeted on about a quarter of his routes. I do expect this might be the start of a pretty good season, sneakily, for Russell Gage.
Yeah, Russell Gage in full effect last week. Elsewhere, a rematch of Super Bowl 49. The Patriots, Seahawks, almost everyone from that game is gone. But who's your left shark from this one, MJD?
Well, again, you see it. DK Metcalf. I don't like to be negative because it's Friday, but it's not a good matchup for me. He's probably going to draw Stephon Gilmore with the top corner in the NFL right now. And I think with the way the Patriots are playing defensively, this is just a sit for me. I know you drafted him pretty high, but I don't think he's going to produce that well this week.
You know what? I'm going to say start Cam Newton this week. Number one, because I wrote an article for NFL.com called Unpopular Opinions, if you want to go check that out. Plus, Cam Newton was pretty good last week against the Miami Dolphins, despite having just 155 passing yards. He was out there running like the Cam of old, a pair of touchdowns. And N'Keal Harry blew a touchdown. It could have been even more. But I think that if you have Cam Newton and you took him as a flyer, perhaps he might be good. Here's the news flash. He's good. Get him into your lineup.
Couple of AFC contenders, the Ravens and the Texans. I'll start with my must start, and that is Marquise Brown. The Texans were in 2 high looks so much against KC that Clyde Edwards-Helaire ran for 1 billion yards. Expect them to be closer up this time to try to stop Lamar and company. I think Hollywood goes big this weekend.
You know, I'm going to say this. Don't sleep on Jordan Akins, and I'll tell you why. For some reason, over the last towards the end of last year and obviously week 1, he's been the guy they've kind of looked at in the red zone. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins not around. You see him making plays here. And guess what? Baltimore allowed 14 points to David Njoku in week 1. So I tell you what, open your eyes and wake up. If you have a tight end problem, Jordan Akins may be your guy.
I'm awake. Broncos Steelers, Marcus, James Conner trending in the right direction, in his words, straight from the source, to play through ankle injury. Does that change how you feel?
Not really. I think you still give Benny Snell a start. I mean, I think instead of maybe having him as an RB2, you probably drop him down to a flex. But what we saw from him on Monday, even before we saw the injury to James Conner, Snell was just much more efficient with his opportunities. There was talk that now, even with Conner back, we could see more of a rotation between these two backs. Plus, with Pittsburgh's passing game, I don't think Denver can afford to load up the box and focus on stopping the run. So I think there's still going to be some opportunities for Snell this week.
You know, Marcus, I love when we talk about running backs. Again, I'm being negative this time. I'm going to sit Melvin Gordon. It has nothing to do with Melvin Gordon at all. I think he's on his revenge tour. But we saw what the Pittsburgh Steelers defense did to Saquon Barkley. And, I mean, to me, this is just one. It is probably the top defense in the league right now. And any running back that goes against them or any receiver, I'm just going to sit against this defense until I'm shown otherwise.
Get back in with the Lions and the Packers at Lambeau. MJD, you think one of the secondary receivers for the Packers can absolutely go off again?
Yeah, MVS, when you watch this game against the Vikings, he was the deep threat. They were getting him down the field. He actually dropped a couple touchdowns as well. I truly believe that with Devontae Adams on the other side getting a ton of attention, I'm going to start Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I got it right, I think. Hopefully I got it right this week.
I'm going to say you should sit Adrian Peterson this week. I know nostalgia is a powerful drug, but sometimes you got to stay away from it. His game looked last week, it looked great against the Bears, but 10 of his 17 touches came in the third and fourth quarters after the Lions had a 2-score lead. I don't see the game script being quite as favorable this week against the Packers. I think DeAndre Swift starts to see more snaps, and if the Lions are trailing, which I expect, Swift is more likely to be used in the passing game.
Never take someone else's nostalgia, Marcus. Vikings at Colts, couple teams hoping to avoid a disappointing 0-2 start, which is why I say the Vikings are going to lean heavily on Dalvin Cook, as they want to do all the time. Mike Zimmer's defense traditionally causes problems for Phillip Rivers. He's 5-0 in the last 5 games against him. I think on the offensive side, they're going to grind it out with Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, you know what, Patrick? For me, this is a little bit above a sleeper. If you're streaming defenses, this Vikings defense is a sneaky good start, and I'm going to tell you why. Phillip Rivers is a turnover machine, period, point blank. He turns the ball over. He did it last year. He did it in week 1. That means he'll do it again. I'm going to play for the upside and say the Vikings may get 2 or 3 picks in this game.
All right, let's keep it going, MJD. Right back to you, Rams at the Eagles. You are the radio voice of the Rams, so give us a beware.
Yeah, beware of Zach Ertz. You know what? Zach Ertz is from my neighborhood. He's from Danville, California, up north. And this is just a thing. I didn't like the way the game script went in this game. It seemed like they were looking at Dallas Goedert more. And then the Rams have been doing a great job. And there's rumor that Jalen Ramsey may be covering him a little bit. So I would just beware of Zach Ertz this week.
Well, sort of along those lines, I think you got to start the Rams defense this week. And I go back to last week when the Eagles gave up 8 sacks against Washington, and Carson Wentz just had pressure in his face all day. So if the Eagles can't slow down this Washington team, I think they're going to have problems with Aaron Donald and his pals up there. Plus, if the Rams offense gets going, especially through the air, which I expect, this defense can sort of focus on just pinning its ears back and coming after the quarterback in the second half.
Then we'll go from the Rams to the Chargers as the Bolts will get their chance to open SoFi Stadium against KC. You absolutely must start Tyreek Hill. He has more receiving yards against the Bolts than against any other team in his career. He also has more rushing attempts as well. If you're thinking about benching Tyreek Hill for some shiny object, don't do it. You took him where you did for a reason.
So I'm going to go and try to talk people down off the ledge about Austin Eckler. I know last week is not what everybody expected, although he had 84 rushing yards on 19 carries. I mean, that's not terrible. The one target last week was a little bit disconcerting, but when you think about it, the Browns running backs only got 3 targets all last night in Thursday's game, so maybe the Bengals can just cover running backs. I know there's some concern with Mike Pouncey out, but I think you trust the volume in this game and think that Austin Eckler's going to be just fine.
We found what the Bengals defense is good at. That's our showdowns for now. It's time for Breaking the Ranks. Adam Rank and Michael F. Florio, get in here as Michael handles our fantasy player rankings over at NFL.com. You should check them out on the research tab or in the fantasy app. But rank is always good for a little friendly debate. Debate's fun sometimes. Which quarterback ranking?
I want to debate you on Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, we can debate all the time. Debate Florio, though. He's the one with the important stuff. Why are his quarterback rankings bad, right?
Well, I don't know if you took a look at what's going on, but he's got Mitch Trubisky, Miracle Mitch, way down at 26. I don't know if you watched the game, Florio, but Mitch had more fantasy points than Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. Ever heard of them? You should have, because you have them ranked higher. Now, listen, I might not be starting Mitch this week against the Giants, who gave up 3 touchdown passes to Ben Roethlisberger, but, I mean, put a little respect on his name, please.
I do have Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson ranked ahead of him. Unfortunately for you, ranked the Bears did not a couple drafts ago, but I like Mitchell Trubisky in this matchup this week against the Giants. I'm not reading too much into week 1. Like, yeah, he had a good game. It's against the Lions. That is what he always does. I do like this matchup against the Giants, but I think he's better for 2 quarterback formats or as a DFS value than someone you want to start in like a 10 or 12 team league.
You know what? I didn't sit here. I didn't pitch this segment to get dragged for the Mitch Trubisky draft of 2017. I don't like this at all. What did I sign up for? This is awful. Listen, I got one thing.
You yourself on that mission there.
I got 1 week where he was better than those guys. Give it to him. Just put him at 25. I don't care.
Okay, let's get to the running backs. Florio has a former league MVP ranked outside of the top 30. Do you like that, right?
You know what? Actually, I would have Adrian Peterson a little bit higher. And it goes back to something that Marcus was saying as well, where he doesn't believe in Adrian Peterson this week. But one thing that stood out to me in that game was that he led the NFL in week 1 in rushes of 10 yards or more, which was significant. And obviously, he could get game scripted out of this game against the Packers, even though he had 3 catches last week. Didn't drop the game winner either. But the one thing that I expect from Matt Patricia this week is to really feature Adrian Peterson early on and try to get him going, try to shorten that game and give him an opportunity. I really do believe that he's a flex option, maybe a borderline RB2 this week.
Yeah, I don't love AP. He did lead them in carries last week, but Swift led them in snaps, he led them in targets, and he had both of their touches inside the 5-yard line. Those are like the money touches. To me, Adrian Peterson, you have to worry about him getting game scripted out, and I think he is a low floor. He could give you 9-10 fantasy points, but he doesn't have much upside. So I like to go with options that have a little bit of a higher ceiling than him.
By the way, here is the touch that DeAndre Swift had. Whoops. Oh, no.
Yo! Okay, more barbs being slung here. Let's go over to receiver. Some guys who you think, maybe Mike thinks they're going to catch the ball too much this week, right?
Yeah, this is getting really contentious. I didn't expect it to be this way, but DJ Moore is a player that I absolutely love this season and feel like he's going to be very good this year. I'm really worried about this matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We saw what they were able to do last week, against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They shut down Michael Thomas, and really, when you go back to the middle of 2019, I believe it was week 11, was the last time they allowed a quarterback to throw for more than 300 yards. So I see that DJ Moore is, I believe, 7th on your rankings right now, Mike, and I kind of would have him down more in the wide receiver 2 category.
I get it. The matchup on paper doesn't look as good as the Bucs secondary once did, but in a close game last week, DJ Moore saw really nice volume, leading them in targets and air yards. And again, that was a close game. This is a week where I think the Panthers could be trailing a little bit more, have to throw. And I know the Bucs secondary has been playing better, but I still think it's the way to attack that defense. Their run D is literally the best in the NFL. So I think if they are trailing, we're going to see more passing volume for DJ Moore than expected.
Cool. You convinced me. I'm in.
All right. It is time for Points, Counterpoints, the segment where we make sure that you've got the lineup that you need to match any of the dumb luck that Steve from accounting, hate that guy, gets in your work league matchup. Marcus, if you need 30 points from your quarterback to keep pace with Steve, who we hate, who would you feel confident starting?
Yeah, I mean, Steve just sort of backed into Joe Burrow and a huge game out of him. So if you need to sort of battle that, Dak Prescott, I think, is a solid start for you this week. He gets the Atlanta Falcons, who gave up 31, nearly 32 fantasy points last week to Russell Wilson. As much as I love the Seahawks' weapons in the passing game, I think the Cowboys have even more weapons there. I expect this to be a high-scoring matchup, and I think Dak can match or maybe even exceed what we saw from Danger Russ last week.
You know what? I'm going to go with Kyler Murray, Marcus, and I'm going to tell you why. It's his ability to run the ball. I mean, when you can do what he did against the San Francisco 49ers, and last week I said he was a sit because I heard so many great things about this Niners defense, and they played well, but Kyler Murray in this offense, I mean, it seems like he'll be scoring 30 or more every week. So if you drafted him, play him if you need 30. I know Steve, he got lucky, but Kyler's a for sure thing.
All right, Rick, it turns out Steve started Nick Chubb last night, so you need at least 25 points from your RB1 to keep pace. What's the best case scenario and the worst case for Steve?
Well, by the way, Steve auto-picked Nick Chubb, so don't let him get too excited about that. But I love Derrick Henry this week going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. You said just before the break, like, he has run through this team previously back when they were, star-studded. Now, you look at what's happening with that defense. There's a lot of turnover. And you look at the situation in Tennessee. We talked about it at the top of the show, where you have a lot of their receivers injured. A.J. Brown is not playing, in case you're just joining us. So I look at this as a game script where Derrick Henry is going to carry the ball somewhere around 60 times. Or maybe not that many, but you know what I'm talking about.
All right, so if I'm chasing points as well, I'm going to start Zeke for a couple of main reasons. One, the Falcons defense was miserable against the Seahawks, especially through the air. They made Chris Carson look like Ezekiel Elliott out of the backfield. The second reason is Steve loves the Cowboys, and again, we hate Steve. So this is effective because it puts him in a bad situation. MJD, let's say that you want a receiver that's going to put up 25 or more points. You need it. Who do you feel the most confident in?
Well, before I say that, guys, I have to say this. I must be Steve because I had Nick Chubb go last night. So whoever I'm playing against in our league, they're about to get dominated. But if I have a receiver because Steve had whoever, OBJ, go for 17, and I need a guy, I'm going to go with Mike Evans. I truly believe the Buccaneers are going to bounce back this week. Mike Evans, I mean, he's going to be the guy, a young secondary out there that they've made some mistakes. I think Mike Evans in this Buccaneers offense, they're going to take advantage of that. He should get you over 25 points this week.
Well, I'm going to go with Allen Robinson, and we're in luck because Steve doesn't pick players based on their college, and he's like, Penn State receivers, am I right? And so he passed on Allen Robinson, and now to our benefit, we're going to start him this week against the New York Giants, who allowed 3 passing touchdowns last week to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm not sure that the Bears are going to be in a position where they have to throw the ball as much as they did in the fourth quarter last week, but I still believe that they're going to throw the ball to Robinson. And I want to believe, too, that the NFL behaves like Varsity Blues, and Mitch Trubisky wants to get Allen Robinson paid, so he's going to throw him the ball a ton. I know that doesn't happen that way, but that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, the true, teammate making it work there. Marcus, a tight end, Hail Mary. Say 20 or more points to get back at Steve's email practices. Who are you turning to?
Yeah, I just can't stand how this dude replies all on every single email. It is absolutely the worst. So because of that, I'm throwing Jared Cook in my lineup against him this week. I mean, last week, he had nearly half of New Orleans' air yards. Could be similar this week because Michael Thomas likely isn't going to play. Facing the Raiders, who, yeah, sure, it's a revenge game, but more importantly, the Raiders gave up the 6th most touchdowns to tight ends last season. I think that Jared Cook is going to be a big beneficiary of having no Michael Thomas. He's going to see a lot of targets because of that.
To me, with Kenny Golladay likely out again and the Lions needing some points, perhaps with a revitalized Packers offense on the other side, I think Stafford and T.J. Hockenson build on what they had last week. He had 5 catches and a score. Feels like a 7-catch and a touchdown kind of opportunity to just slide past that 20-point wall. That's it for Points Counterpoints. And a reminder, folks, if Steve reminds you of anybody, he is strictly a hypothetical person. So don't get too upset. If he does remind you of yourself, maybe evaluate some things. It's time, as we are 6 months into this pandemic, and at this point, a lot of us have had just about exhausted every bit of our content library on any streaming service out there. But what if I told you there was a movie that would fill your Friday night and help you replace an injured tight end this week. If you need a streamer, check out this trailer for a new film directed by our very own Adam Rank.
In a world where tight ends are becoming increasingly scarce, a star who was once seen as a saint among men
Graham wide open, drags the tackler into the end zone.
finds himself outcast. After years of searching for a new home, he was forced away from civilization, forgotten, finding shelter only with the Bears. Now, in our time of need, humanity calls upon our hero from long ago,
Touchdown, Jimmy Graham, first as a Bear.
standing in his way, 11 Giants and their lumbering defense. Can Jimmy save the day? Find out in Bear Necessity.
Get your popcorn ready.
Now streaming.
It's okay, Tom. It's Feel Good Friday. I'm Maurice Jones-Drew. Everybody who took your advice and installed Tom Brady as their fantasy starter might be feeling a little bit down after week one. Pick him up, MJD. How can we make him feel better?
Well, Patrick, before I do this, I have to say this. I want to say hi to my niece, Logan, and my nephew, Big Boy Jace, whose dad I beat in fantasy in week one. So I know you guys are watching this. So I want to give them a little bit of pick me up. Can you guys hear the music? Do I need to turn it up a little bit? There it is. Yes. Yes. Let's roll the tape. And let me tell you why Tom Brady is still the GOAT and will continue to be the GOAT, please. Here we go. Now watch. Here, this is Godwin motioning to the slot. Okay, he's going to run what we call a nice 16-yard speed out. Now, it looks like he's covered, but the GOAT sees him, and he sees all this space. So he says, you know what? I'm going to put the ball rolling. My receiver can go get it. Great throw. Now, let's look at it from the other angle, okay, because, yeah, he has some bad throws, but he is still the GOAT. You get it? And the GOATs make GOAT throws. Look at that. I mean, that's just on a dime, Patrick. I don't know what else to tell you. All right, he just puts the ball to money. Here we go again. Here's O.J. Howard at the bottom. Great design by Byron Leftwich and Bruce Arians here. The GOAT with great play fake. Sets up. Guys pressuring his face. He sees it. Look, and Gross going to put a nice little touch on this to O.J. Howard. I don't want you to strain. I just want you to catch it and drag your toes. Now, here's my favorite one because we talked about Mike Evans having a huge day. And yes, Tom was trying to force him the ball a little bit. But this here is a precise throw. You got press man against Mike Evans. Look at the GOAT put the ball where only Mike Evans can get it. I get it. Everyone's upset. Everyone's nervous because he didn't play like the GOAT the whole time. It was just a little hiccup in the matrix. He'll be back like Neo, I promise you. All right.
Well, his ability to transform the football into an actual GOAT, it highlights just how good he is. You made me feel better. I didn't even start Tom Brady, so I already feel better, MJD.
Well, I'll tell you this. Instead of pig skin, it was goat skin out there. That's what he's going to be using now, I promise. He'll be back.
All right, don't get at us, Peter. Let's get some more of our Sunday showdowns as we welcome back Marcus Grant, Adam Rank, and Michael F. Florio. We'll keep it in Tampa Bay, gentlemen. Other than Brady, who are you feeling good about, Florio?
I'm going to start Ronald Jones this week. He led the Bucs running backs in snaps, touches, targets, catches, and yards in week one, and he could not have a better matchup. The Panthers have allowed the most fantasy points per game to running backs since 2019. They've allowed 33 touchdowns to running backs in that span. No other team has allowed 24. And Josh Jacobs finishes the RB1 against his defense last week. I'm not saying Ronald Jones is going to be the RB1, but I think he's going to have a very strong fantasy game.
Me, Mike, I'm starting Robbie Anderson, not just on the strength of that Sir Per video alone, but because of the way the offense operated in week one. He had 8 targets against the Raiders. The defense, of course, is a lot tougher this time around, but clearly he's a big part of the offense that Joe Brady wants to call. All right, you call him that? I do, Robbie, and I also call you a starter on my fantasy team. Sir Per, not a bear, but you know who likes bears? That will be one Adam Rank.
Yeah, I think I'm going to talk about every Bears possible. At some point, I'm going to have to try to work in Jay Cutler. But again, for a lot of the same reasons we love streaming Jimmy Graham. We want to play Allen Robinson, maybe even Mitch Trubisky. It's because this Giants defense has a deficit in this secondary. It's a big reason why they brought in James Bradbury during the offseason. But what we saw on Monday night shows us you can start your receivers against this team.
Yeah, for me, it's a beware on the other side. Evan Ingram, folks, I know this is disappointing because a lot of you thought he was a steal in round 7, and he might still be. But last week, it was a tough defense with great safety play. That was a problem, and looky here. Here we go again with the same situation in Chicago. I think he'll get you wins later this season, but not so much this week. From there, we go to the Niners-Jets. And guys, the Jets look kind of bombed out and depleted.
Yes, they absolutely did. That's the reason I'm saying start the 49ers defense this week. I mean, the Jets offense, 254 total yards. That was pretty abysmal. Now they come into this game with no Le'Veon Bell, no Jamison Crowder. Sam Darnold had pressure in his face a ton. He was sacked 3 times against the Bills. I would expect the Niners, especially after kind of a shaky defensive performance last week against the Cardinals, I expect they're really going to try to get after the quarterback this week.
And to your guys' point, I'm saying sit every Jet in fantasy this week. The Jets have averaged the fewest yards and touchdowns per game since 2019. The 49ers defense has allowed the second fewest yards per game since 2019. And the Jets' top 2 weapons in Bell and Crowder, they're not playing this week. So maybe you're thinking, I could get Chris Herndon in. But the Niners have been so tough against tight ends this last year that I don't want any part of Adam Gase in that Jets offense this week. I'm saying sit all of them.
You can take it as a positive, Jets fans. We're motivating the team. They're going to try harder now on offense after hearing what Marcus and Michael Florio had to say. We got a few more games to get to later in the show, but if all this advice is inspiring you to make a brand new roster for daily fantasy, you've come to the right place. Let's make a day of it. Adam Rank, how did you build this daily fantasy lineup?
Well, I really wanted to stack a lot of these Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper did have some room left for CeeDee Lamb, but one of the guys I really like is Deontay Johnson this week. Now, obviously, in that Monday night game against the New York Giants, he didn't have the production we would have loved. He didn't get into the end zone. Juju had to steal a touchdown from him, whatever. But he was still one of the most targeted receivers in this game, and he was the Steelers' most targeted receiver last year. So I like him this week against the Broncos.
Time to check out some surprising sleepers presented by Geico. Michael F. Florio writes our sleepers column for the website, NFL.com/fantasy, to read his whole list, and you should. Michael, who is on that list that you want all of our viewers here to know about?
Yeah, one sleeper this week is Logan Thomas of the Washington football team. He led them with 8 targets last week, and he led all of their tight ends in snaps and routes ran. Plus, the Cardinals have struggled against tight ends, allowing the most fantasy points and touchdowns to tight ends since 2019. So I think Thomas is a name that you could pick up off the waiver wire and plug into your starting lineup if you lost George Kittle.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be Jerick McKinnon because you lost George Kittle. They need to get back to getting this young man going. We saw he was very productive. Don't be surprised if you see him playing out at wide receiver a little bit. We saw Jimmy Garoppolo throw to both him and Mostert. So if you're looking for a guy and you have him on the end of your roster, he may be a flex play for you this week.
Well, if you are losing Kenny Golladay, who's not going to be playing in week 2, I think the guy you look at is Quintez Cephas. Last week he had 10 targets. That was most on the ball club. This could be a very pass-heavy game script with the Lions taking on the Green Bay Packers. So look for Cephas to get plenty of snaps, and you should get plenty of opportunities in the passing game as well.
We got plenty of games to rip through here on Sunday's Showdown. Let's get to the football team against the Cardinals. Marcus, you've got a surprise here.
Yeah, I'm just saying to beware of Kyler Murray. And I know MJD said he liked him. And look, I understand the rushing ability is what could certainly help out. But I'm just watching this Washington defense after they got so much pressure on Carson Wentz last week. What did help Kyler Murray was that he got the ball out quickly against the 49ers. He's going to have to do that again. But those guys up front for Washington, they are fierce. They're going to be coming after him. So he's not a complete fade for me. I'm just saying just sort of beware of what might happen this week.
Yeah, the football team's D is good. On the other side of the offense, I'd say sit Terry McLaurin this week. He draws the Buda Baker / Peterson secondary matchup. I think they key off of him as that Washington offense is still kind of trying to figure some things out. He is the one known on that offense. People know that he can produce. I think that hurts him in this game against Arizona. Let's keep it moving here. Resident Bills fan, Michael F. Florio, who are you jumping through a table for in this matchup against the Fins?
I'm not jumping through a table for anyone, but I do think Josh Allen is a must start this week. He accounted for 91% of the Bills' yards in week 1 and was involved on all of their touchdowns. Plus, he's averaged 31.08 fantasy points per game in 4 career games against the Dolphins. That is the most that any player averages against any one team in NFL history. If there is ever going to be a week that you trust Josh Allen, it needs to be against the Miami Dolphins.
Well, I'm saying to sit Jordan Howard, and I might just be talking to myself because I had talked myself into believing he'd be a kind of a solid middle round pick. But he had a 7-8-9 game in week 1, 7 yards on 8 touches on 9 snaps. Did have a touchdown, but that still didn't really salvage his day. Myles Gaskin was the lead RB in Miami with 35 snaps. Now he's got this Buffalo defense that really shut down the Jets run game. So Jordan Howard is a sit, and he might be a guy that you might think about putting on the waiver wire soon.
And where would we go on Jags Titans other than Maurice Jones-Drew?
Yeah, here's a sleeper for you guys. I think Gardner Minshew. If you got some guys with some tough matchups that we've seen this week, and you're looking for a guy that's can be productive, if the Jags want to win, it's going to be on Gardner Minshew. Obviously, 3 touchdowns, 1 incompletion last week. I think he gets even better this week, and him and Jay Gruden will be on the same page. And don't be surprised if he lights it up again. I mean, Gardner Minshew is on fire right now.
Welcome back to NFL Fantasy Live, where our experts have so much foresight into fantasy football, they can provide you Tuesday's waiver wire targets today. Adam Rank, when the dust settles on week 2, who is everybody going to be scrambling to pick up?
Well, I really believe that people should go out right now and pick up Chase Edmonds of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, you know what your roster looks like. You know there are players on that team that are never going to play. Chase Edmonds has a role on this squad with the Arizona Cardinals. Last week, he carried the ball 6 times, had 3 receptions. You saw the touchdown there a moment ago. And even if you don't have Kenyon Drake on your squad, he's going to be a viable option. There are going to be some good matchups for him to get into the game. It might not be this week against the Washington FT, who are very strong up front, but Chase Edmonds is a player that should be on more fantasy squads.
Yeah, I like that rank as a sneaky way to get some exposure to the Cardinals, but I'm going to go with Paris Campbell. He's available in 88% of NFL.com leagues, but I expect that number to shrink. He finished week 1 as the wide receiver 27, leading the Colts in snaps and receiving yards and tied for their team high in targets. And he plays the Vikings this week, who allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers in week 1 and the 3rd most since 2019. So I think he's going to have a nice week, and people are going to be trying to add him come Tuesday.
Let's say you absolutely whiffed on somebody in the draft. You've got a spot. I already said they were going to hit up Dalvin Cook, running a lot the Minnesota Vikings after that loss against the Packers. I think that they will sprinkle in more Irv Smith. They invested heavily in him in the draft. He didn't get any of the action in week 1, but he was on the field and in the routes for most of the passing plays. Kirk is going to look his way more on Sunday than the 1 target that he had last week. Go ahead and fill up that spot now.
Well, we have been spending most of the show trying to figure out how you can sort of replace the loss of George Kittle. And this is not a one-to-one replacement here, but I do think Brandon Ayuk is going to make an impact in that 49ers offense this week. Makes his NFL debut after missing last week with a hamstring injury. And you look at those Niners wide receivers last week, 11 targets, 4 catches, and 41 yards. They need to get some more production from that position, especially with no Kittle. I think Ayuk steps in and gets quite a bit of targets here in week 2.
All right, we're all about helping people. Let's get to the social real quick before we go. Rank, why don't you take this one? Christopher Reynolds Jr., young Reynolds, says A.J. Brown's out. Should Parker or Corey Davis move into the flex, or does he take a shot on Kelly or Dobbins?
I really like Corey Davis this week. He's kind of a fun option. J.K. Dobbins has some upside as well, but I actually would suggest going out and getting Paris Campbell, who Florio was talking about, even though Florio was super mean to me earlier.